parenting can be a really tough thing. I know that when I was raising my kids, that there were some times that I just literally wanted to just throw them out the window. I never did it, by the way. But there's something about raising kids that we don't have any idea what's going to happen when we start to raise them. And so I'm excited to introduce our next guest regarding this book, No Problem Parenting. He's one of the authors, Dr. Mort Orman. And Dr. Orman helps dads, especially angry dads, to become non-angry dads. So Dr. Orman, welcome to the stage. So excited to have you here to participate in this book and to share your message and your story. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much for having me here.
Did you ever feel like throwing your kids out the window?
Every once in a while, yep. Once my daughter got to be a teenager, it got a little more challenging. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, don't even remind me of the teenage days. Like those are long gone. And that was a tough time, especially the teenage years. With my daughter, I have a son and a daughter, but especially with my daughter, because I've just found there's so much of this, just combativeness. And I'm sure it was partially me, partially her. And just making it through that is a challenge in and of itself. And one of the things, like the chapter that you wrote in this book is called No More Angry Dads. And I would love for you to share, like, what is that all about? I know a little bit of your story. We talked about it, but why don't you share a little bit, like, what is that No More Angry Dads? What does that mean?
Yeah, it's really a love letter to dads to let them know that if they have an anger problem and if they're concerned about how their anger might be affecting their kids or how it might be affecting their wives or the people that they work with, if they're, if they're concerned about anger and they've tried to do something about it and nothing's really worked, I want them to know there is a solution. There is something they can do to stop being the angry dad and to stop having all the consequences, the negative consequences that can come from not knowing how to control anger and having the anger damage our relationships, it can damage our health, it can do a lot of different things, damage our marriages. So it's really a message of hope to dads to let them know that if they are in that situation, and not all dads are going to be in that situation, but there are plenty of men who are married and have children and they have anger issues. And it's really destructive to their lives. And they don't have to keep putting up with it. So that's my main message through this chapter. Hopefully they'll read this chapter and other chapters in the book. But what they'll get from me is, hey, if you've got an anger problem, you can get rid of it. You can get rid of it fairly easily and fairly quickly. I talk about how you can do it in just 10 1-hour sessions in a program that
Wow.
I've developed called basically called Angry No More, which takes people from being very angry, even if they've been angry all their life, and I can show them how to not get angry in just 10 short sessions. It's
What
it's that.
causes that? Like, what causes that anger? Because there's anger. I think probably the mass majority of us experience anger,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
what is it that causes some people to be angry a lot more frequently, maybe than others? What is that?
yeah. Well, I think all of us living in society today have been badly educated about where our anger comes from. So we don't really understand it. Okay, and one of the things
Mhm.
I talk about in this chapter is that most people have a kind of a 1-2 concept of anger. They see something that they don't like, or their kids misbehave, or their kids talk back to them, or something like that happens, and then they feel angry. And it looks like that's the whole story. It's 1-2.
Right.
The thing outside of them that they see causes the anger. In the chapter, I talk about how anger is actually a 4-step process. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, and we misunderstand that. There's 2 steps in the middle between seeing the bad behavior or the behavior that upsets us and feeling the anger. There's 2 steps that occur in our bodies and our brains that are invisible to us, so we don't even know they're there, and nobody's teaching people about. But that's where most of the anger is actually coming from. And that's why you can have 2 people witness the same event. You could have 2 people standing in a grocery store, two friends in a grocery store, witness a mom and a kid who's misbehaving, and the mom hauls off and slaps the kid, and one of them will get angry or feel angry about that, and the other one won't.
Hmm.
So it just there's different things that go on internally within us. The person who gets angry has one set of observations and interpretations and perceptions, and the person who doesn't get angry has a different one. it's not the event. They both saw the same exact event. They just have different philosophies, different ways of looking at it. And if you have a certain set of perceptions or filters, you get anger. And most people don't know what those filters are. They don't know how they're making them angry. So when they try to get rid of their anger, they're only working with 50% of the puzzle pieces. The most important puzzle pieces, what's going on inside them, they don't have any awareness of. And that's what I do with people when I put them through my program. I teach them how to understand exactly where their anger is coming from. Those steps 2 and 3 in the middle that most people don't know anything about. And I didn't know anything about back when I was really angry in my 20s and 30s. And no matter what I tried to do, I could not get rid of my anger. And it wasn't until I finally figured out what those 2 steps were that were invisible, because they were internal, that I was finally able to get my hands on the controls of my anger, and was able to make my anger go away when I didn't want it. And I can teach other people how to do that. So that's the whole purpose of the chapter, is just to let men know if they're having anger issues, there is help that can very quickly and very powerfully eliminate most of those anger problems.
I love that you figured that at such a young age, in your 20s, and then being able to help other people through that
It was
as well.
More like my 30s.
30s, okay. Well, my dad was a very angry man, and he was a very volatile, abusive alcoholic, and there was like that anger. So as you mentioned, the story of 2 women seeing somebody slap their child around, and then the way they respond is different. I don't know that I was ever exactly like my dad, but I certainly felt like I wanted to have that anger, and I think I just stifled myself out of fear, like of what might happen. But how do you when a person is experiencing that kind of anger, that those 2 steps that you're talking about, steps 2 and 3 that are in between, is it those 2 steps that's what you teach them of how to work through, so that the anger, what happens to the anger then if we're not experiencing the anger that we would have felt?
Well, if you're not generating it, see those 2 steps, steps 2 and 3, is where the anger gets generated. As I just showed you, it's not generated by the external event. It's precipitated by the external event, but it has to have a program running in our bodies and our minds that has a certain structure to it, and it has a certain way of looking at things in order to generate the emotion of anger. So once you've generated the emotion of anger and you keep generating it, then you have all these problems like, what do I do with it? How do I express it? How do I keep it from being harmful? How do I keep it from damaging my health, making other people feel bad? You got all those problems. But if you know how to step in and stop generating the anger, you know what steps 2 and 3 are, where the anger is coming from, you can step in and deal with those 2 steps so you can stop generating the anger. And then you don't have anything there that you need to worry about managing or figuring out how to release. Okay.
That brings to mind,
or getting into trouble for expressing
right.
and releasing it. Yeah.
That brings to mind, because we talk about things getting built up, right? Like the anger gets built up. But if I'm understanding correctly, what you're saying is that we don't have to, it doesn't have to build up. It doesn't have to get to a head and then blow steam, that you help people to not get to that point of having it build up. Am I understanding that correctly?
When I was in my 20s and 30s, I was very angry, and the slightest thing would trigger me, and I would just get angry, and I couldn't control it, no matter what I tried to do. Once I understood what steps 2 and 3 are and how I was generating my own anger, if I start to get angry now, I know exactly where it's coming from. And I know how to step in and intercede so it doesn't keep building. And I actually know how to make it disappear, because I know what the causes are, and I know how to see through those causes to discover where I may not be seeing things accurately. I may have misunderstood something, or may have jumped to a conclusion that's making me angry, but it may not really be true, So unless you know what the mechanism is, unless you know what the thoughts are and the perceptions are that cause anger in human beings, you can't question them. You can't ask yourself, is this true? Is this true? Is this true? Is this true? Because you don't know what the 4 steps are that ways of looking at things that produce anger. Just like your father didn't know what they were. He had no chance of controlling his anger. He just got triggered and he got angry. And he was missing the 2 most important steps in the process. No one ever educated him about it, and he didn't figure them out himself, because it's hard. It's hard to figure it out on your own, because they're inside of us, and we don't see things inside of us all that easily.
Yeah. And I found that a lot of times when he was flying off the handle, it was about something else. Like it was like that. It was just kind of like building up inside of him where
Yeah.
finally something just triggered that just flew him off.
Yeah, but it's all those things that built all those little things that built up anger cumulatively to then when some 20th little thing happened, it all comes out. Okay, but you still have all the if you knew how to stop all those 20 things to begin with, then you wouldn't have this buildup of anger that then comes out from a minor kind of an incident.
Yeah. Life
So
doesn't have to be
it's all about
angry.
anger. It's all about anger generation, and no one's teaching us how we generate anger.
You know, because there was that movie, right? Anger management movie. But what you're saying is really about the generation of it. You know, don't wait until you get angry.
Managing anger is like the booby prize. You know, you've already gotten angry, and now
Yeah.
what can I do with it? The real way to win against anger is to be able to shut it off when it starts happening for you. You start to get triggered, and you know exactly what's going on, and you know exactly how to step in and shut it off right from the get-go. And you can do that very quickly. You can learn it very easily, and it's very powerful. I mean, I've taken people who have been angry all their lives, and nothing has made any difference. And some of them have seen therapists, and some of them have seen anger management experts, and nothing has stopped them from being angry. Okay, and I can work with them in 10 sessions. At the end of 10 sessions, they're not getting angry anymore like they used to. They have a whole new understanding of anger that's much more accurate and much more beneficial for them, and they now have their hands on the controls. And
Does this also work on children, or are they
it's a
not
little harder.
developed
It's a
enough?
little harder on children because you really have to have the
Yeah.
experience, the life experience, to know when your anger is being generated by misperceptions, misunderstandings, through experience that you learn as you go through life. That a lot of times the way you automatically see things is not always the way they really are. And sometimes it
Right.
takes kids a while to build up that body of experience before they can start referencing it.
Yeah.
So,
Wow. Well,
but I mean,
I love this.
theoretically, it could work with kids. It's just a little harder.
Yeah. Yeah. Completely understand that. I love what you do. I think it's very important, you know, as a child who grew up with an angry dad, you know, I'm so glad you're doing this type of work and making that impact. And you can connect with Dr. Mort at theangersolution.org. We'll put that up on the screen, theangersolution.org. Go connect with him over there. And Dr. Mort, in the book, do you share with the audience, do you share those steps 2 and 3 inside the book?
I don't have enough time in that short chapter. You're limited to only so many words, so I don't have time to
Yeah.
go into detail. But it's important to let people know. I explain to them how it's not a two-step process; it's four, to hopefully encourage them to be curious about what those other two steps are and how they could learn about them. Because it takes some time and it takes some expertise to teach people that thing. It's not something I can just do in a short chapter. But when I work with people over 10 hours, I'm able to train them in the whole concept and then work with them so that they can see. And we actually work on examples from their own life. You know, they tell me things that made them angry in the past or things that made them angry yesterday or last week,
Yeah.
and then we run it through the system so that they can see, yeah, okay, now I understand better where the anger was coming from. Okay, now I see what I can do to not be angry in in that exact situation that I didn't know about before when I just got triggered and got angry. So it's very powerful, but it's not,
Yeah.
it's not something you can just quickly, teach somebody. I mean, it takes some time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating topic for sure. And imagine, like, if you know somebody who gets angry easily, that maybe it's not really getting angry easily. Maybe it's been building up inside. You know, I think that's what happened with my dad. But
Yeah.
if you know somebody who's like that, you know, definitely get the book. You know, I encourage you to entice them to read the chapter just to see where they might fit in and reach out to Dr. Mort. So Dr. Mort, thank you so much for being part of this book. You can get your copy of No Problem Parenting at actiontakerspublishing.com/NPP. And Dr. Mort, if you could share with our audience, what is one thing that you would love them to take away from reading this book?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is don't believe the myth that's very prevalent out there today that, once an angry person, always an angry person.
Hmm, that's a
Even if
good
you've been
one.
angry, even if you've been angry for years, you don't have to stay that way. You don't have to keep having those anger episodes. With the right understandings and the right methodology, you can actually go from being an angry person like I did, a very angry person, to a person over the last 40 years, I've had very little anger in my life at all.
Mm.
And I would have not, if you had told me back when I was in my 20s and 30s that that was possible, I would have said, no way, not for me.
Yeah.
I'm just an angry guy. That's part of my personality, and it's always probably going to be that way. So I wouldn't have believed it if you told me that. But actually now, having discovered what I discovered and then seeing the impact and then looking back, I say, holy crap, I actually was able to make a phenomenal change that I didn't think was possible. And most people don't think it's possible. And a lot of people I work with don't think it's possible when we start working together. And they have that same reaction, like, oh my God, we actually did it.
Yeah.
I'm actually less angry now than I used to be. I wouldn't have thought that was possible for me to do. Yeah. So that's the biggest and the most exciting thing for me is seeing people go from before to after, and particularly when they don't believe that there's anything that would have made any difference. And nothing did make any difference, by the way, until they got introduced to this particular way of looking at dealing with anger. And so they probably had some justification for believing that nothing was going to change because nothing they tried changed, because they weren't approaching these two, pieces of the puzzle that I was fortunate enough to figure out with a lot of help, by the way. I didn't just sit there by myself and figure it out. I did a lot of personal development work and spent the years, before it finally clicked. And I kind of put together a bunch of stuff from different, experts that finally made the difference for me. So it's took me many years, and now I'm able to distill it down into 10 sessions where people don't have to go through that same process I went through, and they get the same result. So it's really kind of exciting that we're able to do that these days. It's a whole new revolution in anger elimination, not anger management.
Right. Well, I love this. I think it's so important because there is no need to spend our lives being angry. It creates a lot of turmoil around us. And also, it's creating turmoil within ourselves, but also those around us. And so if we can get out there and share our lives in a better way, creating a ripple effect around us, if people see the angry person become non-angry, then that will help them to see that there's also hope for them. So Dr. Mort, thank you so much for being part of this. Truly appreciate you. Go get your copy of No Problem Parenting at actiontakerspublishing.com/NPP. There's also a lot of free gifts over there from our authors, and we'll see you guys later. Thank you so much.
One of the things that I've personally found from my experience of working with Action Takers Publishing is that I've walked away with more friends than I had before because of the relationship that you build with the authors while working in an anthology. I think it's an amazing project to be able to get published. It's a fantastic way to get published the first time, and I've almost seen people who get hooked on doing anthologies because once that bug is bitten, you feel like you can release more and more and more and more stories, and Linda's got a bunch of titles that I think resonates with a lot of us who live in the real world. One of the things that I've personally found from